This is a response to Kabane the Christian's response to part 1 of my Jesus Was Not the Messiah series. Links to the relevant videos are to the right of the screen, as ever. In part 1 of my series, I looked at 5 purportedly fulfilled messianic prophecies. Kabane dealt with each of them in his response, so I'll go down the list responding to each of those. Number 1, Matthew 2:23. I argued that since there is nothing in the Hebrew Scriptures about Nazareth or people from there, and the words the author of Matthew attributes to, quote, the prophets, he shall be called a Nazarene, are not found anywhere in the Hebrew Scriptures, the author of Matthew fabricated this, quote-unquote, prophecy. Kabane contends that Matthew 2:23 is not meant to be a direct quotation, but rather a summary of multiple prophetic passages in the Hebrew Scriptures. While Kabane says that we don't know precisely which passages are being summarized, we can make some good guesses. What is Kabane's guess? Well, this is where the argument begins to unravel. Relying on John 1:46, Kabane claims that being from Nazareth was not prestigious and that, quote, Nazarene was used as a disparaging remark. This, Kabane claims, correlates with Isaiah 53, which says that the suffering servant will be despised. Kabane contends,
the Gospel authors quite clearly saw Isaiah 53 as a messianic chapter. This is one example of a prophecy where Matthew would have seen it as prophesying that he will come from some place of low esteem.
The problem? Several. First, Isaiah 53 has nothing to do with Jesus. I discussed that in part 2 of my series. Second, the interpretation Kabane offers does not comport with the story told by the author of Matthew, who has Joseph bringing Mary and the child Jesus back to Judea from Egypt. It's important to note here that in Matthew's infancy narrative, Joseph and Mary are not originally from Nazareth, but rather from Bethlehem in Judea. Joseph discovers that Herod's son Archelaus has inherited his dead father's reign over Judea, which scares Joseph away from returning to live in Bethlehem. In order to get Jesus out of Archelaus' jurisdiction, where, presumably, he would have been in danger, Joseph takes him and Mary to, quote, the regions of Galilee, and came and resided in a city called Nazareth. Matthew says nothing about Nazareth being a crappy place. Kabane's reliance on John 1:46, a text written approximately 50 years after Matthew was written, is utterly misplaced here. Matthew does not connect Jesus living in Nazareth to his being despised. Rather, he has Jesus in Nazareth as a way to protect Jesus' safety, which he claims was a fulfillment of prophecy, a prophecy that does not appear in the Hebrew Scriptures. Nothing in Matthew even suggests that Jesus was disliked because he was from Nazareth. Nothing. Number 2, Matthew 27:9-10. With respect to this passage, I noted, among other things, the fact that the words the author of Matthew attributes to Jeremiah do not appear in Jeremiah. Moreover, I noted that some Christian apologists point to Zechariah 11:10-13 as the source of the purported prophecy, but that's plagued by 2 problems. First, Zechariah is not Jeremiah. Second, the passage in Zechariah doesn't say what the author of Matthew says. Kabane responded by claiming that Matthew was referring to 2 prophecies, Jeremiah 32:6-9 and Zechariah 11:10-13. Kabane also asserted that the practice of using Jeremiah's name to refer to other prophets, quote, isn't unusual. My response is, first, a number of Christians have made the claim that it was common for Jeremiah's name to be used when other prophets were actually being cited. I have yet to see a shred of significant evidence in support of this claim. Kabane offers none. Second, Jeremiah 32:6-9 has nothing to do with Jesus. Nothing. It talks about God telling Jeremiah that he should buy a field from his cousin, which Jeremiah does buy for 17 pieces of silver, not 30. And it's not a burial field. This is irrelevant to anything in the Jesus story. Third, as I noted in my video, Zechariah 11:10-13 doesn't say what Matthew says. Number 3, John 2:17. Kabane and I agree in principle with respect to this passage. He says that Psalm 69:9, which is quoted in John 2:17, should not be regarded as a fulfilled messianic prophecy. However, he also claims that the passage should be viewed as an example of typology. However, that takes things right back to the issue I raised in my video. That is, the person speaking in Psalm 69 is a foolish sinner. If traditional Christology is true, then that cannot be a foreshadowing of Jesus. Number 4, Matthew 2:14-15, in which the author of Matthew ripped half of Hosea 11:1 from its context, a lament about Israel, and misapplied it as if it were a messianic prophecy. Kabane claims,
Again, this is just an example of typology. No problem here.
the problem for Kabane's assertion is that it is a direct contradiction of what the author of Matthew explicitly claims. That is, that this is a fulfillment of prophecy. What was spoken by the Lord through the prophet might be fulfilled, saying, "Out of Egypt did I call my son." There's no legitimate exegetical principle by which one can simply disregard what the author of a passage explicitly claims for what he wrote. But that's precisely what Kabane has done here in an attempt to rescue the Matthean passage from its obvious fatal flaw. Number 5, Matthew 1:22-23. In my video, I noted that the author of Matthew changes the text of Isaiah 7:14 in order to make it conform to the Jesus story as he's telling it. Kabane's response?
The exegesis of that time allowed minor modifications to the text for exegetical purposes. This concept is utterly foreign to us, but it was fully acceptable, I repeat, fully acceptable within the context of that time. So
First, says who? Where does one go to find this exegetical principle that allegedly obtained at the time Matthew was written that allowed what was believed to be the Word of God to be changed, quote, for exegetical purposes? The Bible repeatedly warns against changing the Word of God. See, for example, Proverbs 30, verses 5-6. Every word of God is pure. He is a shield to those who take refuge in him. Do not add to his words, or he will rebuke you and prove you a liar. There are other such warnings elsewhere in the Hebrew Scriptures, as well as in the New Testament. Kabane's purported exegetical principle flies directly in the face of these warnings. Second, even if there were such a principle, this is no minor matter. Part of the sign from God in Isaiah 7:14 is that the child's mother will name him Emmanuel. Third, as I discussed in my video, Isaiah 7:14 has nothing to do with the Messiah. In sum, and with all due respect, Kabane's response fails on all counts. However, I thank him for his response and for the tone of it. I look forward to his responses to the rest of my series after he returns from Kenya. Kabane, I hope you had a great trip. Thanks a lot.